Family and friends of Freddie Gray are going to be gathering today for his funeral. Now, Freddie Gray, of course, is the man who just 2 weeks ago was assaulted by police, arrested, and died a week later from the horrific spinal injuries that he suffered during that arrest. And over the weekend, protests broke out in advance of his funeral from people who were angry with the police, angry with the investigation. It drew the eye of both the country and the White House. The White House sending a delegation of officials to show their solidarity with the family and with the protesters, sending them to the funeral. The delegation includes Cabinet Secretary Broderick Johnson, chair of the Obama administration's My Brother's Keeper Task Force, Heather Foster, an advisor in the White House Office of Public Engagement, and Elias Alcantara from the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. Now, of course, the investigation into exactly what happened during the arrest of Freddie Gray is still ongoing. We don't know if there is going to be what we would consider justice coming out of this. But in case you didn't see the original footage showing some of the assault and the aftermath, with people calling out that he is clearly injured and he needs to be dealt with more carefully, let's roll that footage of the initial arrest.
Right. Right. His leg look broke. Look at his leg. Look at his leg. That boy's leg look broke. His leg broke and y'all dragging him like that.
So you see there, he's literally being dragged. His legs he doesn't seem to have any control over them whatsoever. The police, I don't know if they had just had enough and they weren't going to be respectful in terms of how they transport him. It's clear that he's been injured in some significant fashion. People, onlookers can tell that. We did find out eventually that his spine had been severed through more than 80% of the way. And it's believed that that, combined with damage to his throat, was what ultimately led to his death.
So, there's a lot of problems, with that. Obviously, they roughed him up before they put him in, and that's what I thought when I hadn't seen this particular one where you could hear him screaming. So, but it definitely looked like, he already had some kind of a spinal injury, something's happening. But here's another thing that you don't hear enough about is that what cops would do, by the way, he was then put in the back and they didn't seatbelt him in.
Yeah.
And so,
which, if he had any sort of spinal injury at that point, I would imagine that any sort of driving would only exacerbate it.
Yeah, in fact, what cops cops would do, I don't know how often, but they've been documented that they would do this, they would put people who they arrested in the back of the van and then drive around like maniacs so they would bounce around inside. They would do that on purpose.
As like a punishment.
As a punishment to hurt them. And so they got caught doing this. One guy, they had to pay out $39 million because they paralyzed him doing that. Now, other guy, they had to pay, right here, $7.4 million because they heard another guy doing that. So then they got this guy, he already can't walk. They put him in the back of that thing, and they don't seatbelt him in.
Yeah.
And then they pull him out, and he's paralyzed. Oh, no kidding? No kidding. And the cops said that it would have been dangerous because it was too narrow of an opening for the officer to go back. Again, first of all, it's bullshit. Second of all, officer safety is always paramount. I thought that when you became a policeman, the reason why we give you respect and admiration is because you're willing to sacrifice your safety for your community. But that's not what they do. Every one of these situations, it's always this officer safety is paramount. I thought he was coming at me with a screwdriver. I feared for my life, so I shot him dead.
Yeah.
So that's, again, he didn't handcuff. He didn't seatbelt him into the back of the paddy wagon because it would have been unsafe for the officer to get through a narrow opening to go where the. So all this stuff about it's always the officer's safety is paramount, which that's bullshit. The officer is supposed to sacrifice his safety for the community, and that is not what's happening ever.
Yeah, and look, even I'm sure we would be pretty deferential to, like, if a suspect has a gun and they're pointing at the cops, and the cops shoot them, we let you kill people. We let you stun people. We let you use other non-lethal forms of weapons. And if someone's fighting back, we let you beat the crap out of them in those cases. We just ask that when They're not fighting back whatsoever. And when they seem to have lost the ability to move most of their body, you're willing to do something to ensure that they don't suffer far worse injuries while you're transporting them to be arrested. Like, we will defer, just not 100%. We're not asking for you to go up against a team of ISIS snipers, but you will be put at some risk if you're a police officer.
Yes.
That's the difference between a police officer and a regular person. If you don't take any risk, then I'm a cop.
Yes.
And I demand the same respect that they deserve.
Well,
because I walk down the street, and if that's the only risk they're taking, then there's not really any big difference.
And yes, but it's pretty. If you remember in the Tulsa case with the insurance salesman who they let become a cop because he gave them money to the sheriff, in that case, after he shoots him, they tackle the guy. No need to stun him or do anything. They already got him on the ground. He shoots him with his gun.
Thinking he's tasing him, he shoots him.
Shoots him. The guy says, "I can't breathe." The other cop says, "Fuck your breath," as he's kneeling with all the pressure he can give on the guy's head. So the guy's head is on concrete. He's got a bullet in him. The other cop kneels on top of his head with all his might as he's already shot and he knows he's shot. And the guy's unarmed. So you don't think those cops put all the pressure in the world on Gray's spine when they were trying to cuff him? Of course they did. They knelt on him as hard as they could with all their weight and all their might. And yes, they cracked his spine.
Yeah. Now, back to the protests, because obviously the media is going to spin it as, a violent mob of angry people. And there was some violence. There was some looting. There was some destruction of property, including cop cars. But when you have a protest of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, it's going to attract some extremists, obviously. So they say that some police officers had been scuffed up in minor skirmishes with the protesters. Considering what's going on around the country, I think that level of violence, that level of protest is probably to be expected at this point. You're seeing there the property damage.
So my point is, where are the cops? So why aren't there
Probably
cops?
worried about.
So the cops are somewhere else. So
no, you do see riot police there.
It's almost like they wait for it to become a riot. They let it, and then. Yeah. Okay.
I believe that man there in the footage is talking about not expecting any justice. I would have gone with a different T-shirt because that has connotations of extreme violence, and he was actually being totally non-violent. But we also know that amongst all of this, a couple of journalists were roughed up by police. So we have a photo editor who said, "They just swarmed over me," referring to the cops. "I got hit, my head hit the ground. They were hitting me, then someone pulled me out." And another print journalist was also assaulted by police during those protests.
So that's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. So when cops indiscriminately assault people, reporters, that's okay. That's not, nobody gets upset about it. No one's upset. Those cops aren't under investigation. It's not going to be the lead story. What is going to be the lead story is there were protesters who threw stuff at cops.
Yeah.
But the other way, so how is that okay? These are supposed to be trained professionals in a volatile situation. So whenever we have a volatile situation, cops are going to go fucking crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how just get ready.
You remember the footage out of Ferguson with the cops screaming in people's faces as they pointed assault rifles at them. People who weren't doing anything.
Yes.
And you just put them in that situation, and they think that they're in the streets of Baghdad.
Yeah,
they think that enemy forces are swarming around them, and they're looking for an opportunity to begin spraying off with their assault rifles.
Again, it's part of the culture of policing in America. This isn't a small problem with a few bad apples or a few departments somewhere. It's the culture of policing, and it started with the drug war in the 80s. It got ramped up on steroids after 9/11, and that's how cops think. You're the enemy, protect themselves at any cost. They're not there to protect you, the citizen. Don't ever think that for a second. They're there to protect themselves, and they took those jobs because they like being cops. My dad's a cop, my grandpa's a cop, my brother's a cop, my best friends are cops. They love being cops. The first cop I meet who joined to help his community will be the next cop I meet will be the first one. Because none of them joined because they want to help. They get a kick out of it. Why else would you do it? So let's just keep that in mind. And the culture of policing, I'm glad we're now finally, I was really castigated on this network by other people for the strong views I had about the policing culture. And now it seems like everyone's starting to get it not only here, but around the country. And we are starting to have that conversation about what's wrong with the police culture everywhere. Ferguson, New York. Do you know New York?
Oklahoma.
One year, Bloomberg News said that New York paid out almost $1 billion in police brutality claims. Bloomberg News said that $750 million in 1 year, which is more money than New York spends on their parks and recreation. That's for police brutality.
Yeah.
And these are the cops who are turning their back on Bill de Blasio. So it's good to see that we're starting the conversation, and it's all because of cell phones and video camera that we're getting this.
Yeah. So it actually looks like trying to reform the police could actually be a way for many cities to plug their deficits, maybe. It's absolutely horrendous, especially in New York and other areas. But we have Oklahoma, we have Arizona, we have police killing homeless people. And again, it doesn't have to be a huge percentage if the rest of the culture doesn't speak out against it and doesn't attempt to see it reformed. And if you're a police officer who doesn't engage in any of this and thinks that those bad apples are giving the rest of cops a bad name, then you should do whatever you can to reform it, to clean up the image, because we didn't used to see cops in this way 50, 60 years ago, probably because of the lack of cell phone cameras.
I think African Americans always
They probably did, yes. But the media didn't have access to this information or wasn't interested in reporting it. But we don't have that bias here. Now we know that 5 of the 6 officers have given statements to investigators. The 6th has invoked his right to refuse to answer questions.
It's good public
I'm sure he has a good reason for doing that.
Yeah, maybe I don't know, maybe he kneeled on a kid's back. Maybe.
We don't know because he refuses to say.
Yeah.
So we don't know currently what's going to end up happening to these cops. We have reason to believe not much is going to happen based on other similar cases over the past few years. But we hold out hope that something will be done, because it seems like another tragedy that the media is thankfully pushing for once. They're covering these stories. But the police seem to be protecting their own in this case, and we don't have a lot of reason to believe that much is going to come out of it.
Very unlike all the other cases where the police protect their own.